it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Katie Wismer. I'm an author and an editor. I have 10 books out currently. All my stuff is linked down below. Today we're doing another author money video. This is a series that I started a few months ago and promptly forgot about, so this will be episode 2. I'll have the playlist linked down below if you want to go back and see what episode 1 was all about. Today's topic I'm actually really excited about because this is something that I hear talked about in the community a lot. I definitely heard a lot of advice before I started publishing about this, and my feelings on the topic have changed over the course of my career, and I have some like perfect case study books to be able to show you this. So we're going to be talking about publishing series versus standalones, specifically in terms of money and read through and return on investment. So we're gonna get down to like the nitty-gritty details. I don't actually usually do that over here on YouTube. If you end up liking this style of video and you want to try some other ones, this is the type of stuff I usually do over on my Patreon page. I don't know why, I just felt like we'll do it on YouTube this time. I'm going to show you all the numbers. So basically I thought it would be interesting to compare my series, the Marionettes 4 books complete, and then my interconnected series, the Pact 2 books complete. They're standalones but interconnected. And the reason why these two I felt like would be interesting comparisons are because these 2 books are my best-selling books and they have sold pretty much the exact same number of copies. Like, if you saw my how many books I sold last year video, I do a pie chart of like lifetime sales, which book is my bestseller, and these are less than 1% away from each other. They're less than half of a percent away from each other. Like, they're so close. They're also perfect comparisons because they're pretty much exactly the same length, and they're both in Kindle Unlimited, so that just means when someone reads them through KU, I get paid almost exactly the same thing for each because they're like the same page count. And I also put in pretty much the same amount of effort into marketing these 2 books because they're my bestsellers. So comparing these 2 I felt would be a really interesting look at if you put the same amount of money and effort and time into 2 pretty much identical books, other than one's a series and one's a standalone. What different results are you going to see? You might be thinking, oh, that's kind of obvious. If there's more books in this series, clearly it's going to make more. Yes, but is it proportionally more? You know, it's 2 books versus 4 books, so it should be technically twice as much, correct? Plus, these 2 are standalones and they're interconnected. I also have another standalone that's like in the same genre. We'll get into it. I went back through and I looked through lifetime sales, compiled all of the numbers. Some of them I had to estimate a little bit, so this might not be exactly accurate, but it's close enough to get the point across. At least for me, when I first started publishing, one of the first pieces of advice that I heard was to publish in a series for a lot of different reasons, for branding purposes, marketing opportunities, and then to get that read through. And when I say read through, what I mean is you market the first book in a series. If someone likes it, they're going to organically go and buy the second one. You're not marketing books 2, 3, and 4 on their own per se. If you can hook people with book 1, they're going to go and read through the rest of the series without you having to like hold their hand and instruct them to do so. With a standalone, if you hook them with that first book, some people might go like seek out your other books and try to find the one that's like the most like this book that they really liked, but a lot of times it's not as organic. For example, book 1 ends on a cliffhanger. You want to know what happens next. Of course, you're going to jump straight into book 2. You pick up this book, satisfying conclusion. There's some links in the back matter saying, hey, if you liked this, you can go back and read book 1 in this little duology, or you could read this other standalone that I have that you might like. There's less like agency, like, oh my god, I have to read that next book. There's more options of like where you could go. Do you see what I mean? It's like a less clear, this is obviously my next step path. So before we get into the numbers to compare these, I just have like a few little pro-con discussion points I wanted to throw out here. From what I have found to be true in my, I'm trying to do the math, 6 years of publishing, but also technically 4. It's complicated. I have 10 books out. 7 of them are novels. 4 of them are in a series. 3 of them are standalones. I have found it to be easier to market standalones if the series is not complete, but I have found it easier to keep momentum going for a series over a long period of time, because every time the next book in this series comes out, that gives me more marketing opportunities. It kind of like breathes some fresh life into the series compared to like continuing to market a book that came out 4 years ago and there's not really anything new. This book has just been out for 4 years and you can go read it now, whereas this got a refresh every couple of months or every year when the next book came out. With all of that said though, as soon as I finished writing this series, I went running, screaming back to writing standalones, if that tells you anything. In my experience, writing a series was so much harder for a lot of different reasons. Just like I can't even, night and day experiences writing standalones and writing a series, night and day. It also doesn't help that these are completely different genres. This is like urban fantasy, dark fantasy, contemporary romance. I have found read through to be much better with a series. And the reason why people bring up marketing when talking about like read through and series versus standalones is because if that read through is better for a series and it's more organic, it's going to make a lot of paid marketing and paid advertising more worth your while because you're going to get more return every time. So then you have more options. So anyway, let's jump into the comparisons just for these two books, then we'll get into like full series comparisons. Like I said, these are pretty much exactly the same length. They've both gone viral on TikTok, Instagram, where I market honestly pretty much exactly the same amount of times, and they've sold almost exactly the same number of copies. The only real difference being the Marionettes has a hardcover option and this one doesn't. Otherwise, they have paperback, ebook, and Kindle Unlimited. They have audiobooks, all of the same options. So the first graphic I'm going to show you is strictly for KDP. So this is just how much money these books have made on Amazon. So this doesn't include any print copies sold through Ingram Spark, audiobooks, signed copies. This is just like ebooks, Kindle Unlimited, and paperbacks or hardcovers that are sold through Amazon. So just through KDP, you can see the Anti-Relationship Year has brought in about $22,000 and the Marionettes has brought in about $26,000. So pretty close, about a $4,000 difference. Here's the numbers directly through KDP's dashboard. The reason why there's two different ones for the Anti-Relationship Year is just because the subtitle is slightly different for the print book and I can't change it, so they split the paperback and the ebook versions. But now we're gonna talk a little bit about read through. Like I was saying, if you start with the Anti-Relationship Year, the most natural path for read through would be to go back and read what's technically book 1, which is the Anti-Virginity Pact. It follows a different character. You don't have to read it to complete the story, but if you wanted more that's kind of like this, that's where you'd go. If you finish the Marionettes and you want more, you have 3 more books to go to and they all have cliffhangers, so it's a very natural path to lead you to the next book. So then if we're looking at the numbers for both of these series, these ones include everywhere, not just Amazon. This includes audiobooks, print books, signed books, everything. You would expect in a perfect world, if these sold exactly the same, the Marionette series to have exactly twice as much because there's twice as many books. Here's what it actually looks like. For the Pack series, they've brought in about $32,000. The Marionette series has brought in about $102,000. So more than 3 times as much. Keep in mind, this is for the exact same amount of effort, time, and money that I've put into marketing and advertising these books. I don't go through and market like book 2, book 3, book 4 by itself. I simply make a post about book 1. And this happens organically. Or I put book 1 on sale and this happens organically. Or I run an ad for book 1 and this happens. So upon looking at just the first book in a series, those first numbers, it looks like you get the same amount of return for the same amount of effort and money. But once you start looking at the bigger picture and you see what people do after they read the book that you first convinced them to read, things start looking very different from standalones and series. In my experience, this is also highly dependent on the book itself. The return is potentially a lot higher for a series, but that is given that, to put it frankly, the book is good and it hooks them and it makes people want to read on. So circling back to the pretty standard advice when you're first starting out, if you want to build your career quickly, you want to start to make a full-time income faster, a lot of people will tell you to publish in a series. My numbers on the surface level agree with that. I don't necessarily think that's the best advice for everyone if you're brand new to publishing. Like I was saying, writing a series has been the hardest thing that I've done in my career so far. It's been incredibly rewarding. I really enjoyed working on this series, but I'm also glad that it wasn't my first book or my first couple of books. The Marionettes book 1 in this series was my 5th book. So I already had a lot of experience under my belt of writing, of publishing, of having to go through like every step. I didn't jump straight into this, which I'm personally thankful for. I also mainly focused on publishing each next book in this series, although there were a couple of releases in between that weren't related. So a few other things that don't have to do with numbers to keep in mind if you're thinking about writing a series. I think just from like a craft perspective and from a writer perspective, I think it's more difficult. So if it's like your first book, I don't know, I feel like having practice with some other books might come in handy. But then also just from like the author side of things, the mental side of things, writing and publishing a series was a lot more taxing for me because, I mean, a blessing and a curse. I had a readership like right off the bat, and so there were different expectations with the series. There was more anticipation for each release, there was more pressure. People loved or hated things because they had those high expectations. So just from a mental standpoint, I felt a lot more pressure to make these books as good as they could be, to get them out as fast as I could. And I feel like if I had that pressure on like my first couple of books, I don't know, that really would have changed my outlook on my career. And I just feel like that could crush an early writer early on if that's your first experience with publishing. Everyone's different, but honestly, the advice I'm kind of leaning towards, if you want my 2 cents, like what do I know? I think mastering being able to write a standalone first might be worthwhile. Endings are hard. This is coming from me. I think endings are the hardest thing in the world. It's my weak spot as a writer, 100%. And I think you learn and you grow with every book that you write. Hopefully every book that you write gets better than the last. So if you want to jump right in and start off writing a series, to each their own. In my experience, that's been more financially successful. It's been more difficult on the writing side. There's been a lot more pressure on the reader author side. You have to think about a lot of other things when you're publishing a series that you don't have to necessarily worry about with standalones, like timing. How much time is going to be between each release? Are you going to set up a pre-order right after book 1's out so people can pre-order as soon as they're done, even though you haven't even written the rough draft of book 2? Then you have to figure out like how much time do you really need to get this book ready? You have more deadlines with the series, which really stressed me out, and that like really affected my creativity. You have to think about the market, and if you're planning 5 books and you're a slower writer, it might be a perfect fit for the market now, but by the time you finish the series, things might have changed. I just wanted to throw a few other things to consider out when writing a series, because if you're only looking at the numbers, you're only looking at the surface level, sure, it looks great, sure, it looks like the better move, but I hear that advice a lot kind of as blanket advice, and it kind of makes me cringe. But that's been my experience so far. Now that I've wrapped up the Marionettes series, I'm currently working on another series, but it's more like the Pact, where they're interconnected standalones, and I'm having the time of my life being back writing standalones. I'm really enjoying it. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to answer them if I'm able to. If you're an author, I would love to hear your opinions. If you've written, what your experience has been like writing series versus standalones, if you've done both. I'll have links for all kinds of related stuff down below in the description if you want some more content. But I think that's all I have for you today. See you guys in the next video very soon. Bye.
No. Pretty Caroline, stone cold stunner. She was a winner, started working at the diner. Serves this on her mind to count your blessings, 'cause it's telling first, telling first. They'll put you down and leave you there, don't make them scared. Yeah, it's the ugly truth. How they coming for you. Yeah, no. Don't you think you're better off where the neighbors don't stare? Maybe you're wanted, looking good for the movie screens, living in make-believe, hoping your wishes get granted. I know you never giving up unless it's real. A slippery slope.